Welcome to the Combative Nerds Podcast. Join us while we break balls and try to outwit each other at every turn while debating all things nerdom and trying to make sense of this world. Look, I'm not gonna lie, it's a Herculean task and I'm not sure we have enough brain power to do so. At the very least, we can laugh and offend each other through the process. Thanks for sharing your day with us. Now on to our show. Hey, what's going on, guys? This is Raiderlance and
Not Maggot.
First, housekeeping. Please like, subscribe, share, comment. We need whatever help you can give us. Hate to plead every episode, but got to do a call to action. You got to help us up so we know that we're doing a good job and we can keep bringing you good content. So, Not Maggot, how you doing, brother?
Good. New year, new us, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Had a lot of fun the first time, so I figure we'll do this again sometime.
Yeah, you're a hit, man. You're, like I said, you're a natural at it. So I just want to thank you. I think it's foolish of you to join me in this conversation, but to each their own. Today, we're going to discuss Andrew Tate and his arrest. It's a very hot topic. Either you clicked on this because you hate Andrew Tate or you're a huge fan and you want to see which side we sit on. Well, I'm the one who wanted to talk about this because I think I had a take that most people don't. I'm not going to call myself a middle ground. What I'm going to say is I wanted to actually analyze this and kind of remove the emotion out of it. Now, for people who don't know me, this is Raiderlance. I'm an attorney. I have a psych degree. I'm not an expert in that field, but what that means is when I analyze things, I kind of look at it a little bit different than an average person. Now, let me first say, this is an important conversation for two reasons. One, he is a popular person on the internet with very polarizing views. And so, of course, this is topical. Everybody's talking about it. But two, these are some heavy charges. Me and Not Maggot do not take these items lightly. We do not want to be flippant. We do not want to offend. But we think no matter what your feelings are, we need to discuss this. So if you don't know about Andrew Tate, and am I correct, Not Maggot? Before I approached you about this conversation, you weren't too familiar with him?
That's correct. I learned that he was the most Googled individual in all of 2022, and
Yep.
I was not one of those individuals. Had never heard of this individual until you actually mentioned him to me. But I did want to throw out there that people that dislike Andrew Tate, I believe that we should refer to them as Taters. Maybe that'll be a thing.
That's great. Oh, man, I can see the T-shirts already. Somebody's going to, you better trademark that. Someone's going to capitalize on it.
I don't know. I don't need him suing me from jail either.
Oh,
It's one of his monetary business methods.
One of his streams of income. Okay, so this is Raiderlance. Let me get my bias out of the way. I have listened to Tate. I think he's extremely charismatic. I know he's the pro-masculinity messaging. He's part of the red pill. He is very popular with young men. Now, I had a couple friends who asked me about him, and here's my general feeling towards him. I think he's very charismatic. He's very entertaining. He's extremely intelligent. And anywhere from like 60 to 80% of the stuff he says, I might not necessarily like the way he says it. I know he might be saying it for shock and awe, full effect. But there's a lot of excellent points that he makes. But what I would say is the other, let's just say 40 to 20% is poison. And when I say it's poison, I mean it's poisonous to a young, impressionable mind. Because he's directing I shouldn't say he's directing, I apologize. His main audience is young men who are looking for some type of mentorship. And what concerns me is not all of his messaging. It's not the way, as he would say, styles it and pitches it. It's that when you get a young, impressionable mind, they tend to just focus on one mentor. And on their own accord, they're kind of turned this guy into a cult leader. And so what my position is if you want to listen to Tate, well, let me back up. Here is my contention. If some or all of these allegations are true against Andrew Tate and his associates, then fuck them. But I do not believe that whether he's guilty or whether these are just allegations, that the message of pro-masculinity philosophy that Andrew Tate champions becomes automatically invalid. What I would say is there are better mediums to hear that type of messaging. And I can name off a bunch of people. You got Joe Rogan, you got Patrice O'Neill, rest in peace. You got Kevin Samuels, who I think is brilliant, rest in peace. You got Jordan Peterson, which is, I would say, would be the best one out of those. Those would be better mediums to hear pro-masculinity, pro-self-improvement messaging that doesn't have all that poison that comes with Andrew Tate. But if you do prefer Andrew Tate because he's charismatic and he's entertaining, then my suggestion would be you have to at least listen to other moderate opposing views, right? You can't only consume Tate and his messaging because then you're just guzzling down that 20% or more of poison. And you're most likely going to just assume he's a great guy and not look critically. That is my issue, especially as an attorney. No one is looking critically at his arrest or the facts in the case because they're so emotional about it. All right, not maggot. What do you think about what I just said? Am I sticking my foot in my mouth?
No, I think you're absolutely on point. I echo a lot of the names that you've rattled off, and some of them get discounted because they may lean one direction or the other.
Sure.
But again, we're talking about an audience that is already, for the most part, in a certain category of people. Just,
Yeah.
because as soon as you say that, if somebody knows Tate's messaging or anything like that, and someone else mentions that they are listening to him, they're put in a box.
Oh, yeah.
And unfortunately, to your point, the 80% that is really not revolutionary, really not novel.
No.
I found even what you shared with me, and I even told this to you afterwards. I said, I feel like as intelligent as he is, the way that he's saying it is intentional. It's intentional clickbait. And that's where I find myself. I'm like, God, like, what you say may be valid, but how you say it is intentionally inciting some kind of reaction.
Yeah. So you're completely correct. And the reason why I know that, and I didn't share this clip with you, is his father was a chess master or grand chess player. I don't know chess that well. And so Andrew Tate, he was also, I believe, a chess master at the age of 6. And he looks at life as if he's playing chess with strategy. And he has openly said on a podcast, and it's all over Instagram, that, no, I think it was on the Patrick Bet Davis podcast. He said, I'm going to give away the game. And he goes, I can say something. And I think he was referring to men are stronger than women. And he goes, that's just a natural fact. And you can just say that point. But if you say it by flipping it and say women are weaker than men, you can incite this emotion. And he goes, once you make and he calls them enemies, once you make your enemies or opposition emotional, you've already won the argument. So you're not theorizing here. That is true 100%. He has openly said he says things to not only get a reaction, but to win the argument. And as an attorney, I can appreciate that tactic. But when you talk about the subjects he's talking about, I don't know if that's the best idea.
Yeah, I agree. You can't rationalize with irrational people. And if you're having a conversation like you and I are, right? Even if we're polar opposite viewpoints, if I can come away from our conversation, from our exchange with some kind of understanding, maybe I don't even agree. Maybe you don't convince me, right?
Maybe you see my perspective. You see where I'm coming from.
Exactly. If I'm there, like if I'm approaching, that's the outcome, that's the goal, then overall, we both win.
Yeah.
But if you're arguing or saying things just to win,
just to prove yourself
you
right,
lose. Yeah. You lose. In my opinion, that's a loss.
I completely agree.
Because it doesn't have to be a winner and a loser.
Yeah, there becomes almost a lack of trust, a creation of resentment, and you become more polar opposite. Everybody complains in the American political system that no one reaches across the aisle. Well, yeah, you've had hundreds of years of people pulling these shenanigans with each other, and they don't trust each other. They don't want to talk to each other unless they're getting paid by the same donors. But that's a different conversation. So let me lay out the game plan for this conversation. It's possibly an ongoing conversation if you guys are interested in hearing a more critical, analytical view. If you just want to hear pro Tate, I'm going to say some pro Tate stuff. I'm sorry. If you hate Tate and I'm a misogynistic pig for saying that, well,
Taters.
Yeah. Well, I agree. If this guy is doing this stuff, yeah, fuck him. And if it's not true, and he still can be a slime bag and a scummy person, but still say and do things that can help people. And what I'm trying to say is this isn't black and white. This is shades of gray, probably a little bit darker gray, but shades of gray. So here's my game plan. One, I'm going to talk about my biases just so you know where I'm coming from on this one. Then we're going to go over the facts of the case. What do we know so far from January 3rd? Then that'll probably be the end of this episode. But then the next episode, I want to go into it with Not Maggot, some of Andrew Tate's clips, some of the things that he says. Hey, can we agree with this? That maybe he didn't say it right, or yeah, we just agree with this. This is truth. Yeah, this is the male perspective. You don't have to like it or love it, but this is it, and you need to accept it. And what about the horrific stuff this guy says? I got a couple of those clips where you hear it, and man, if you have any morality or or any empathy in your heart, you're gonna cringe at some of the stuff this guy says. Now, so that's going to be the formats of these two shows coming out. Part 1, biases, then talk about the facts of this case. Then part 2, we're going to talk about Tateisms, I think they call it. You know, it's the stuff he said to either insert his foot in his mouth or make you think, this guy's a rational, reasonable guy. So, you ready now, Meg?
Let's do it.
All right. So, my biases. I'm a firm believer that everybody comes to the table with a bias. You put your shit on the table, you let the other person know. If you're trying to have a reasonable, moderate conversation so you can move forward or find common ground if there is any, right? So I'm going to say my perspective and why I feel the way I feel, and then we'll move forward. So I grew up in a very religious and conservative home. I'm Mexican American, so I grew up with the Hispanic culture where the women were the matriarchs, but the men had machismo, which is a strong masculine pride. So in a nutshell, women ran the home with iron fist, and the man managed the woman. So I believe that the man should wear pants in the relationship. I know in certain years there's hybrid situations. I would even say mine is a hybrid situation. But I still think that at the end of the day, a husband should be able to make the executive decision because he's going to be leading the household, at least in my house. So next, I'm older. I'm 45. I've been around the block a couple times. I have a little bit of wisdom under my belt. I've seen some stuff. The way I conducted my life is, if I was young now, you could say I was following the tenets of Tate. I've done many of the things that he's encouraged young men to do. So when I was young, I focused on self-improvement. I got in excellent shape. I worked out 5 to 6 days a week, 2 to 3 hours a day. I did that up until 40s, and I'm still trying to P90X. I practiced martial arts and various forms of self-defense for a good 10 years. I achieved success through academics. I worked really, really hard. 2-3 jobs while going to school, commuting, sleep deprived for decades, ended up with a good career because of all of this hard work. So in a nutshell, I focused on myself and my goals between my 20s to mid 30s, and then I started my family. So that's a lot of his messaging to young men. I did that. So clearly I would agree with him. Maybe not the way he says it, but clearly I would agree with that philosophy. Also, when selecting relationships and primarily my mate or my future spouse, I didn't want someone who had a past of promiscuity. Sorry, I'm old school. I wanted someone who was attractive. Sorry, I'm superficial. I wanted someone who was at least semi-cooperative with me, right? I don't want to be fighting with my wife all the time because she didn't like the idea that I thought that the man wears the pants, even though he's going to defer to his wife the majority of the time. When I was looking for a mate or a spouse, I wanted her to already have qualities of being a wife. And I wanted her to be able to be a good mother. These are all things that he says that when you're looking for a relationship or a mate, that's what you should be looking for. So I agree with him here. I believe that the current phase of modern feminism has gone too far because it's anti-male. Look, I went to college in the 90s. And I can see the difference of how feminism and women's studies were then and how it is now. I do think that the modern feminism has gone anti-male, and the biggest problem with that is it's hurting the families in the Western world. And it's promoting the creation of weaker men, which is in turn hurting females. Now, with regard to the allegations against Andrew Tate, human trafficking, kidnapping, physical assaults on women, I grew up in the hood. I've seen some dark stuff. I've seen girls who belonged to the gang. And if you don't know what that means, go watch the old 80s movie with Sean Penn, Colors, and you'll understand what that means. I've known girls who were given to their stepfathers as trade. I've known girls who have had similar situations through willful ignorance by their parents. I do not take this shit lightly. I do not want to defend somebody doing this. But as an attorney, I come to this in two ways. One, I need to look at this critically. He's not convicted yet. He's arrested. There's allegations. There's some facts here. Two, you can't just chalk up crimes in one batch. Here's what I mean. You got murder in the first degree. You got murder in the second degree. You got manslaughter. You got vehicular homicide. There are different degrees to this, right? There's no allegation that Andrew Tate is jumping out of a bush and dragging a woman and doing horrible stuff to her. I'm in no way defending human trafficking at all. Horrible, disgusting. What I am saying is, once you hear that allegation, you cannot just condemn. You need to look at the facts and understand what is going on, what dynamic it is. And in this one, it is a dynamic of, I think the Romanian government calls it the lover boy method. So we need to look exactly what he means. This is not the same as the Mexican cartel getting people who are trying to immigrate to America and then human trafficking them, right? This is a different shade of that allegation. So I want to make it real clear. I'm in no way supporting it. I'm in no way condoning it. I'm not trying to make excuses, but we need to look at what is actually being alleged here. So I think I've talked long enough. Those are my biases. Any response, Not Megan?
A couple things. I mean, first of all, I mean, for, someone who isn't quite as old as you, early 30s, for me, I got married early, very young, rather than knowing who I was, so to speak. It was kind of someone who had said, hey, this is the direction that I'm headed in life. This is what I want out of life. And so rather than going through part of understanding who I was as a male, as a husband, as a father, all of that stuff, we kind of crafted that together. And so for me, some of the things that he says when he's talking, that Tate says is it's different than the experience that I had, because part of my foundation as it was a family unit, that family unit as a whole came from the feedback that my community group that from my local church, hey, this is what a male does. This is how a male submits to his wife. This is also how he shows dominance when necessary.
Headship.
Exactly. But one of the best uses of power is restraint. And so there are times where, yes, I do have to put my asshole hat on and play the big red one, if you will. But to your point earlier, a lot of times I'm submitting to my wife because it's out of love. It's not out of weakness. It's out of love.
Or she could just be better at that topic or have a better perspective on how to manage the house, manage the kids, something.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
We are complements, right? She's supposed to be strong where you're weak, and you're supposed to be strong where she's weak, but together you're strong.
Exactly. And I think that that's something that, again, there's no right or wrong way to do it. It's what method works for you. And there's some people that don't know who they are. And this type of messaging resonates with them because it literally gets them out of this rut of where they are. There's other people that are, hey, this is kind of what I want, but I don't necessarily know how to get there. And so rather than watching an echo chamber on YouTube, having someone come alongside them in real life, in real time, and walking with them, or someone that's come before them, and said, hey, I've been there. I know what that's like. Let me help you, because the biggest thing is it's an inspiration to say, I've stood where you stand and I made it out alive. I came through that. I weathered that storm, and you're going back to help others. So,
or I made these mistakes in your situation, and here's what I didn't consider.
Exactly. And I do agree with you that regarding the feminism going too far, for me, the reason isn't necessarily because of the anti-male side of it. I didn't really consider that. For me, it was more so a standout piece where I noticed that the feminist movement has gone so far as to almost disregard women who choose the stereotypical role of a woman, where it's like, oh, you want to be a stay-at-home mom? you're basically dead to them because you fit the old school mold. You're not progressing. You're not pushing things.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's dangerous.
Yeah. What could be more important than raising a child?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I feel like that's dangerous to basically discriminate your own people, so to speak. It's a terrible way to say it. But you're turning on yourselves as opposed to saying, we have the right to choose. We have the equal opportunity. That's where I feel like the feminist movement made the biggest impact, and it should continue that way. Those equal opportunity rights should absolutely be protected. However, just because you have the right to choose and they choose differently than you doesn't mean that you should treat them like shit.
I completely agree. Yeah. So I should make one caveat here. I don't know about gay couples. I still think that's probably smart to not be married to a woman. Fighter Wizard, depending on the day, will disagree with me. I don't know those dynamics. So we're going to just not discuss them here when we're talking about male-female dynamics and what's best for raising a kid and stuff like that. I don't think there's any studies or stats that I've seen or read. So again, for anybody, what about this? Well, I don't know. All right, just leave me alone. I'm just going to talk about from my perspective and what Andrew Tate has said.
Yeah.
So let's move forward into the actual facts of what is going on. If you haven't heard about Andrew Tate, what is the big whoop of what's going on? So we're going to go back in the past a little bit and talk about the lead up. So I'm going to do a little bit of reading here. That way I can stay a little bit more accurate. And I will tell you when these are direct quotes. So there was an article from the Guardian newspaper. I think it's reputable. I'm not sure. So it's one of the more salacious ones, but the way it read, they didn't have too much shade on it. It was pretty standard. So here we go. The Tate brothers have been under criminal investigation in Romania since April of 2022. Police raided their mansion in Bucharest, Romania, after the U.S. Embassy received a tip-off claiming a 21-year-old American woman was being held there against her will. The Tate brothers were questioned and later released, but the investigations were expanded to cover grape, because of the YouTube algorithm, we're going to have to use that stupid word, and human trafficking allegations. That's direct quote from the article. Now, because I've seen this clip, I'm going to respond to it. There is a podcast called Patrick Bet Davis Podcast. And there was a 4-hour interview with Andrew Tate, Patrick Bet Davis, and then his sidekick. I don't know who that is. And if you go to that podcast video on YouTube at mark 2 hours and 50 minutes in, Andrew Tate specifically addressed what happened back in April. And I'm going to summarize what he said. Andrew Tate claims that the allegations came from a jealous boyfriend who saw his girlfriend at Andrew Tate's home via that female's Instagram story post. The boyfriend then, via telephone, called the girl, confronted her, and said, "Hey, I know that's Andrew Tate's house." How he knew that, I have no idea. But hey, that's Andrew Tate's house. What the hell are you doing there? And so instead of her owning up and saying, "Hey, I'm here partying with Tate, the Tate brothers," she said, "Oh no, I'm being held here against my will," and then hung up the phone. So the boyfriend, who was in America, then called the American embassy in Romania, and he made a criminal complaint. That led to basically the cops being called and his home being raided. Now, Andrew Tate says that he has CCTV throughout his entire house and that he wasn't even home at the time when that phone call was made because he was out gambling at a casino. And so CCTV showed that that woman was able to leave the compound and come back. I think she went outside like to get pizza. So therefore, if she was being detained or held against her will, she couldn't have come and gone. So he said that multiple videos. That is his side of the story responding to that. Now, that has not been confirmed by the police, but that is what he said. He was there. I'm not going to say take him at his word, but that is the other side of the coin in the rendition of what happened. So now let's get back to that Guardian article. In a state, and again, now I quote, "In a statement regarding the current arrest, authorities said 2 British citizens, the Tate brothers, Andrew and Tristan, and 2 Romanians were accused of forming a gang that recruited victims by misrepresenting their intention to enter into a marriage or cohabitation relationship and the existence of genuine feelings and love. This is being referred to as the lover boy method." And you can go ahead and Google that. All right. Back to the article. "Later, the victims were forced to perform pornography through physical violence and mental coercion. Authorities said so far 6 victims have been identified. The statement also mentioned a separate allegation of grape dating to March 2022, although it did not specify against which suspect the allegations were levied." So, April, you had the initial call from the embassy. Cops rolled, did the raid. because of the raid, because of whatever they found, and I think they raided 5. No, I apologize. I'm getting my facts mixed up. Okay, so because of that raid, then the Tates were recently arrested in December, and they raided 5 of the Tates properties, and of course went through everything. And out of the current raid in December, you would say 4 people were arrested: the Tate brothers and 2 Romanians. Later, there's another article, I think by the Daily Mail. They identified those other 2 people who were females, known as their angels or their lieutenants. And my words, not theirs. The allegations were kind of that these 2 women were basically the Ghislaine Maxwells for the Andrew Tates. Like, they were lieutenants and that they helped procure females into the compound. Now, whether that's true or not, again, these are all allegations, but they've identified who those 2 females were. So, what do you think so far? Not Maggot.
It's a whole lot of reporting, and I think that one thing that I noticed was that in all the articles, they all appeared to use extremely similar language.
Yeah.
Both in vagueness, but also in direct quotes, which I thought was kind of strange.
Yeah.
So it's almost like either the information is coming from one source and being put out to multiple places.
I would agree.
Or one is right, one wrote it and the next one took it and said, okay, what else can we write about this? And there was nothing. I was like, well, fuck it, just direct quote it. So it seems a bit suspicious in that regard, just because usually when you ask multiple sources, you have varying degrees of information, and these are so identical
and charged.
It is enough to exactly.
They use very charged, condemning language.
Yes, 100%. That is true. And I think, again, to be fair, we are dealing with language differences and things like that, where I'm assuming that this was information from a Romanian police force.
Sure.
So the language may not necessarily be as crystal clear because nuance and inference and everything else may not be picked up as clearly.
Great point.
So it may be that the interpretation, or the interpreter, if you will, is the one that's providing the link between the 2. Again, I don't know enough from those sources if it was sole sourced or not.
Yeah. So I can already feel people listening. They're like, oh, you guys are getting ready to defend Tate. You're getting ready to. Again, as an attorney, I'm looking at this critically. When laying out the facts, if you're representing one side, you lay out the facts in the way that's more favorable to you and you use certain language. If you're defending the other side, you're going to lay out the facts in a different way with different language that's going to make your side more favorable. Here, the media is laying out the facts with language and in such a way that is making Tate look guilty. Just, there's no way around it. Now, I'm not saying he's not. I'm just saying there is a clear media bias against this because, at a certain point, technically I'm reporting on it, right? And it's topical. It's newsworthy. We're all going to jump on the bandwagon. So I'm part of that problem. However, I'm not going to use that charged language until I have actual facts. So just keep that in mind. Now, for all the Taters, you're going to be happy because now we're going to lay out some of the facts that doesn't make Andrew Tate look very good with these allegations. So there
for
was...
the record,
go ahead.
Do you happen to know what Romania is like, how loose or how free their press really is?
I do not. I know nothing about Romania. No.
Neither do I.
I've heard, and this is, of course, online, that the Romania legal system is basically for hire. So I will be the first to acknowledge I'm an American looking at it from the American legal system. Innocent until proven guilty, Miranda rights, plead the fifth. None of that shit applies here, right?
Exactly.
So all I can do is bring my analytical skills to the table and analyze facts and think critically and build a profile of circumstantial evidence, or, maybe determine a little bit of his motive or intent, if there is one. That's all I really can bring to the table here.
So we're basically attempting to apply United States standards to a foreign government's legal system and freedom of the press with information and all of that stuff. Something tells me that there is no... Well, as we're going through this, we're kind of looking at it from the U.S. perspective, right? But there is no
true.
CNN or Fox News or NBC or anything like that to my knowledge, in Romania.
What
It's
I
just
would say,
one.
sorry to cut you off. What I would say is, I could see how you would say that. I would slightly disagree. I think these news articles and these pundits are doing exactly what you're saying. They're trying to apply our standards and our ways of looking at things to find guilt, right? Without a trial. I think what I'm trying to do, and hopefully you as well, is just sure, we're going to have an American bias and perspective. Can't undo that. But we're trying to look critically at the actual facts that we know, both sides, what the articles and the pundits say, and what Andrew Tate himself has said, and look at it critically from an objective standpoint.
That's fair.
So let's get into some actual facts, some actual details, and let's kind of build a thought process of, okay, well, maybe did this happen? Maybe it didn't happen. You got essentially 6 she said versus a couple he saids. Who's telling the truth here? That's what I want to get into. How do we figure out who's telling the truth? We don't know exactly what the females have said before, but we know that the Tates have been arrested. We know the allegations so far. And again, I think innocent until proven guilty, even though that's not the standard in Romania, that idea helps you keep an open mind to review the facts. Everyone just wants to, this guy's a dirtbag, he's a slimeball. Well, you might be a dirtbag and he might be a slimeball. Doesn't mean he's guilty. Just hold the fuck on and wait for the cops to do their job and the court system to do their job. So there was an article in January 3rd that just came out. It's pretty salacious. Looked pretty bad for Andrew Tate, but it was a lot of hearsay, and I'll go into that later, and I'll discuss the article a little bit later. But here's the question that we're going to pose. Is Andrew Tate guilty of these crimes, or is he being framed by the Matrix? Andrew, and I'm going to generally summarize this, when he refers to the Matrix, he means the Illuminati, the controlling press, the people in power, and the agenda they have for the world. He calls that the Matrix, obviously taking it from the movie The Matrix. So are these people against him? And first they canceled him, which was crazy. I know what happened to him. I know what happened to Trump. I know what happened to a couple other people. And, they were Icarus. They're flying too close to the sun. They kind of got what they got dealing with those people. But there was a concerted effort that was against him. That is true. Whether it was right or wrong, I have no idea. But is he guilty or is he being framed? I think a bigger question is, does he have the propensity to commit these crimes? Human trafficking, exploiting sex workers. I think that is a much more interesting question. Let me give you an example. If there is a gamer who's playing WoW, and kind of like the South Park episode where they're sitting in their basement and they're playing 12 hours a day and they're eating Hot Pockets and they don't get out and they're kind of an incel, what is the chances that he's going to be a drug lord? Right? He doesn't fit the profile for that. Right? Okay, maybe he can steal something or create cyber fraud or steal credit cards or something like that, but he's not going to fit the profile of a drug lord. Does Andrew Tate have the propensity, meaning the capability, to commit the crimes that are being alleged? I'm not saying he did. I'm just saying, is it far afield for these allegations? Well, let's go through some of the things Andrew Tate has said or done. Here's what I'm going to say. It is in the realm of probability that Andrew Tate has some culpability given his current legal situation. I'm not saying he's guilty. That's for the Romanian legal system to determine, and yes, they're being influenced by foreign pressure. But I think Tate himself would absolutely agree that he put himself in this current situation and bears some responsibility for his current legal woes, whether he's innocent, and definitely, of course, if he's guilty. But I'm going to go with if he's innocent, man, this is still part on you. And I know you agree with me. You pretty much have said the same thing. And I'll go into that clip a little bit later. All right. So again, what were the allegations? He was human trafficking and let's just say sex exploitation. Well, in multiple clips, he has openly discussed starting up a current webcam business for adult content with some of his ex-girlfriends that were spread across the world. And he brought them all to Romania. So I think the story goes, what was he? Full Send podcast. And I have the clip here. It's about a 12-minute clip included in the description link. He basically tells the story of how he opened up his webcam business. And he had 6 different girlfriends spread around while he was a kickboxing champ. And then he called them all to Romania, said, yeah, I'm dating all of you. It is what it is. Deal with it. here's how we're going to make millions of dollars. And he broke down the business to them that he wanted them to join. I believe he says in that interview that 4 said no, they couldn't get over it, 2 stayed. And from there, he started to build his empire. So again, he's on a podcast saying that he was in a relationship with 6 different women that he essentially recruited to join him in his webcam business. Now, does that mean he sex trafficked them? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. But he was in an open relationship and used that relationship to then call upon these women to join the webcam industry, and then brought them from their respective countries to Romania. If you look at the allegations of what sex trafficking for sexual exploitation means, there's a lot of elements that that cohabitate both of those stories. I think the intent is important. I think the intent makes an absolute difference. That is the difference between murder and self-defense, right? Completely different intent. I get it. I'm not saying he's guilty. I'm saying this isn't out of left field. All right. So that's from the Full Send podcast. Then he was on the Yo Mama's House podcast with Tom Segura and his wife, and Andrew Tate's talking about his 4 primary sources of income. And he says that there's casinos, a management company for OnlyFans, Hustler University, and the clip actually doesn't show the 4th stream. The casinos he talks about the most, and he says he basically opened it up with the mob as a franchise. And then he talked about the management of the OnlyFans. So he's been very open about having an OnlyFans management company now in 2 different instances. Now here's another clip. It is a clip on YouTube. It's a very short one. He talks about dating a prima ballerina in London. And he said he loved her. He was in a committed relationship with her. He truly loved this woman. And they were, I think, quite young, 21. He was brokey. And she had just graduated, started dancing at, I believe, clubs. And she was around all the London money, around all these rich, powerful guys. And I think the specific person he identified was the British boxer Hay. I'm not sure it's Andrew Hay, or I forgot his first name. I truly apologize, Mr. Hay. And then when recounting this story, Andrew Tate said to this prima ballerina, well, if you're going to go screw these guys, at least do it for money. And so his brother Tristan confronts him, why would you go tell her to screw these other guys? And Andrew Tate responds, look, in chess, you got to know when you've already lost. He goes, I know I've already lost this game. She's eventually going to leave me. Why not bang these guys for money so I can get some of it? So now you have a gentleman who had females internationally in relationships with them, brought them all to Romania to join, and now he's on record saying that he has told women that he's been in a relationship with to go screw for money so he can get it. Okay. Well, now we have this January 3rd article from the Daily Mail. In that article, there is a female, and I'm going to mispronounce her name. I apologize. She is currently 19. Her name is Daria Gusa. For now on, I'm going to refer to her as Miss Gusa. She is the daughter of a Romanian politician, and she was interviewed by the Daily Mail. Biased? Absolutely. The language that they wrote in this article, clearly one-sided. A lot of hearsay, and I will go into what hearsay is. So, myself, Not Maggot, IEG, we're all in the same alliance. I tell Not Maggot one day, hey, IEG isn't happy being an alliance captain. Could you demote him? And he said that I would make a good fit, so you should promote me. Now, Not Maggot, are you going to just believe my word, or what would you do?
Yeah, I'm going to reach out to IEG.
Right, because IEG is going to be a better first-hand source of that information. Why would Not Maggot rely on me, a second person, to hear what somebody else said? Just go to the actual person and hear what they said. So hearsay is basically saying it's not as good evidence and we're not going to accept it because that's not first-hand knowledge.
Anyone that's ever had the childhood game of telephone can basically tell you, exactly how wonky things can get, how bent things can get when I tell one person, then they go and tell the next person, and it becomes this mutation of, and the more people involved, right? The more people that are in between those pieces.
Yeah.
And I would even go so far as saying that, even language can be that way. Translation of language can be that same way. I mean, you speak Spanish, right?
Oh God, no. I'm like,
no,
4th generation on one side, and then my other side was here when Mexico was part of California.
Well, yeah. So I think that interpretation, and language and nuance and all of that stuff, even translating, from one language to the next can be difficult in and of itself. So I don't know if that's technically from a legal perspective, is that a form of hearsay?
I mean, it's in the same realm. I mean, it gets pretty technical because, there's written evidence, there's oral evidence, there's this and that. But in general, you want the firsthand knowledge and not an outside source reporting upon that knowledge, if that makes sense, unless they had it firsthand.
Yeah, you want that person on the stand, not the reporter.
Or you want that report, or you want that video. You don't want to hear what somebody is saying, what that video said or showed. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yep.
So, okay, so that's my opinion about it. Now I'm going to go through this article real quick because I'm going to try to keep this under an hour. So, I don't know how they found this young woman. I'm assuming people are looking for dirt on Andrew Tate. So let's just agree that there's bias on this article right off the bat. Doesn't mean that there might not be elements of truth to it, or it could be completely true. But this article is biased. So they reached out to this Miss Gusa, and she said when she was 16, Andrew Tate reached out to her on social media, followed her on Instagram. Now, Miss Gusa opined, which means she believes, that Andrew Tate hoped to recruit her for her webcam operation. How did a 16 or 19-year-old figure that one out? That's a pretty stretch. Now, maybe she has some familiarity. Maybe that's common in that part of the world or part of her city or municipality or whatever it is. Maybe she does have some knowledge. They don't explain that. They just say that's what she believes he did. Okay. Now, Miss Gusa said that one of her colleagues, I'm assuming that's a translation error, but her peers, let's just call it, also received messages from Andrew Tate. And that colleague went on to chat with him. So now we're in hearsay territory. Then Andrew Tate invited that friend directly to go out with him. So Miss Gusa concluded that he was trying to use the lover boy method because she was young and in that area that was local to him. A lot of hearsay. That's a lot of opining from the situation. So if you were to just give me that fact, I would be like, I don't believe any of it. Here's where it gets tricky. Okay, this is the same article that then identifies the two females as lieutenants, and suggests that they're recruiters. And then at the very bottom of the article, and I'm going to quote, they say this is an Andrew Tate post that was deleted. So I have no way to confirm this. The quote is, Andrew Tate said, "My job was to meet a girl, go on a few dates, sleep with her, test her if she's of quality, get her to fall in love with me to where she would do anything I say, and then get her on a webcam so we could become rich together." Okay, that's pretty damning if that's true, but it's a deleted post, and this article is very biased. So my gut is I wish I saw that because that's really damning, but I can't verify it. And this article is extremely biased, so I can't just accept it on face value. But here's what I can do. Does this fit the profile of anything he said? Well, he said when he operated the sex camp that the girls would talk to the males and that they would say all the wrong things. They would tell them about their travels. They would tell them about their fancy dinners. And then the guys hearing this are like, oh my God, you're killing the fantasy. I can never get you. I'm not that rich. I can't afford that lifestyle. So Andrew Tate says what he did is he unplugged the females' keyboards and then he would ghostwrite, or he started training people to ghostwrite and talk to the men on OnlyFans. So it was guys talking to guys unbeknownst by the client, right? And then he said that he went on to train these people on how to, my words, not his, fleece these individuals and not care what happened to these clients at all. They were taking loans against their homes. And Andrew Tate's words, he did not give a solitary fuck about what those other people felt. And I believe he does that in the Full Send podcast. So let's back up here. Andrew Tate, multiple girlfriends around the world, brings them to Romania to join a webcam operation. During that webcam operation, he mutes them, trains people to then fleece others for money, and is apathetic about it. Recruits two women who could potentially be lieutenants to help him recruit. I'm not saying he did it. I'm saying it's set up to do this kind of heinous acts. Like, he has the infrastructure. I'm not saying he's doing this. I'm saying he's had the infrastructure to do this. It's kind of like people who go martial arts training, do a lot of self-defense, carry firearms, have trained to kill other people. They may not be murderers, but they have the propensity to do some damage, right? It's not a good look. All right. So again, I don't know if he did it. There is no way anybody can conclude for a fact, but I'm saying there's some propensity there. Next, his relationships to organized crime. He has been kind of favorable in organized crime in some of his statements. I really pulled back on that one because I always think of Mexico. But he made a really good point. And that was in certain countries that are not as established as, England, America, Canada, Australia, that the organized crime can be a good thing because it gives some structure, some authority in that area. Now, that is a hard sell for me living in the United States. But the reason why I can hear that opinion is because I had a friend who played the game Marvel Strike Force and he lived in Mexico. And he was like, yeah, the cartel runs things. It is what it is. And I'm not saying he had an issue with it, but I'm saying it wasn't as horrifying to him as it would be to me, if that makes sense. So his relationship when he talks about organized crime is a little different. And as Americans or people who don't live in Romania and can't accept that's the way it is over there, that's on us. You can disagree with it, but you have to accept that's the way things are over there. So
I think it's more of the devil you know
that's
than
a
anything.
great point. I mean, look at Godfather, right?
I think that I remember when you and I were originally talking about Tate and everything, he references what's gone on in the Middle East with various, what we would label as terrorist groups and things like that, where he's more lenient in how he describes them, right?
Yes. I think the Piers Morgan interview is what we're talking about. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yes. And so he, talks about, look, what ends up happening if you pull you dismantled that, right? But then you move away from it, right? You just create this power vacuum, and then it becomes this violence in the street, so to speak, as these smaller rival gangs that are trying to usurp and take the next place. So I think it's a structure thing, like you were saying, but it's also the devil you know. And I do think that when you have something that is an established power structure, it may not be ideal. It may not be what we're used to, like you said. But I do think that the reason that it probably seems and appears more violent to us here in the US is also because we're pushing back against it. Whereas there's a lot of places, especially in South America, where it's like, there might be a cartel-like structure, but the people are accepting of it. This is our fate, whether that's right or wrong, whether you agree or disagree, because it's easier to be agreeable in that instance. And so they're not pushing back. And so therefore they're not receiving the brunt of power, the display of power.
Yeah, I mean, unless you want to take on the world and be the sacrificial lamb for the movement. Again, thank God we're in the United States, and I feel truly sorry for the people who have to endure this. But it is what it is. Let's keep that perspective. All right, so I'm going to go a little bit faster because I know we're running long on time. So he has been very open, and I believe in the Your Mama's House, he addresses this, and he addressed this on the Full Send podcast, that he opened a casino as a franchise for organized crime against their competitors. Now, I don't know very much about mafia. I've known people who know people type of stuff. I stood away from that world. But from my, I guess, novice or ignorant viewpoint, if you're doing business with organized crime, you're affiliated. There is going to be some overlap into your life and the way you deal with things. And I don't think that was his one and only endeavor. And he says as much in that he knows tons of organized crime in Russia, and he names other different places. So it sounds like he is maybe not in that world, but affiliated with that world.
At the very least, guilty by association.
Sure. Let's just say if they had the versions of RICO over there that they have in the United States, the RICO laws, yeah, he might have some worrying to do. But again, different country. Now, there's another post that isn't as damning. I think it's more satirical, or he's just pointing things out. And I want to say something in Andrew Tate's defense. Whether you like it or not, this is true. He is putting on a character. He is not who he is on camera that he is off camera. It may be similar, but I've heard repeated reports that he turns it on, acts a little bit different. I don't know if you watch UFC, but I've heard the very same thing of Kobe Covington, who is I want to say welterweight fighter. I apologize if I'm wrong. But he has this pro-Trump, pro-America, get in your face, just talk down to everybody with sheer ignorance, and then Joe Rogan himself is saying, he's the nicest guy. Like, it's an act. So Andrew Tate, when he says something, there's a spin on it, right? I'm not saying he doesn't believe what he's saying. I'm saying there is a spin, and you have to, you take it with a grain of salt. But in the statement, he says, why is everybody asking me if I'm mafia? People tell us they want to join our mafia. And so his brother Tristan responds to it. He goes, absolutely, we're a mafia. And Andrew Tate says, what are you talking about? And Tristan goes on a laundry list of all the things. They're fighting brothers. They're big. They're strong. They roll around in their Bugattis. They own all this money. They're jet setters. They own these casinos. They do what they want. If anybody messes with them, they don't have to do something directly. They just make a phone call and they end up in a ditch. And Andrew Tate goes, my God, he's basically saying, yeah, I guess virtually we're mafia. I didn't mean to be mafia, but here's what I surmise, that if you are competent in all spheres, successful, young, intelligent, kicking ass, taking names, people will view you as mafia. So he takes that moniker kind of like in a joking way, like, well, I never thought I was mafia, but I guess I am. I get it was more satirical, or he was making a joke to it, but he's flirting with that line. Now, I think if you have ties and you're affiliated and you do business with the mafia and you're okay being perceived as mafia, if people say that you're part of organized crime doing human trafficking, like, this didn't come out of nowhere again, guys. And here to me is the nail in the coffin. Not that he's guilty. Again, I'm not saying he's guilty. I cannot conclude that, especially with my profession. I have to wait for the facts and the criminal system to go into play. But here's what I say, that this is Andrew Tate's fault at the end of the day. And I know that because that's what Andrew Tate has said. So there's a quote where he says, and I'm just going to play it, and you're going to pick it up off of my mic. Let's see. He's referencing chess, and here are his words.
That if you lose, at some point you made a mistake. It doesn't matter if it's the smallest mistake. It doesn't matter if you just took too long to think to make the right move and run out of time on the clock. At some point you fucked up for you to lose that game. It's 100% accountability with no luck. That's the first thing. And the second thing is, you need to, as a man, adopt the mindset that absolutely everything that happens to you is completely and utterly your fault, whether it's good or bad. When the Matrix was attacking me and they were destroying me, when they're calling up my exes trying to get fake fucking charges on me and put me in jail, when they closed my bank accounts and I used $10, $11 million, when they banned me across all social medias and lie about me, when they harass my family, I'm sitting there going, this is my fault. All of this is me. I got here. It's my fault. I'm not going, that was unfair. It was orchestrated. The NGOs worked against me. Because that is not helpful.
So it's accountability.
It's 100% accountability in all things. But also, when I go out there and I start the Bugatti, it's like, that's me. This is my fault. The car is my fault, and the big house is my fault, and everything that ever goes wrong is my fault. Yeah, absolutely. You have to take complete and utter accountability for everything. Can't make excuses ever.
So, this is not a gotcha. This is not a gotcha at all. I agree with 100%. This situation is on him. He recruited females from across the globe, leveraged his relationship, asked them to join a webcam business, started doing businesses with organized crime. He put himself in a situation where one female had to get her feelings hurt and allege something. That's it. Even if he didn't do that, the best case scenario, it's an allegation. He set himself up for this lover boy charge of human trafficking, sexual exploitation. That's on him. I'll feel bad for him. If he's guilty, fuck him. If he's innocent, I hope he clears his name and I hope he cleans up his message. But as an attorney, you can explain away item by item. But when you look at the body of the evidence, when you look at the circumstantial evidence that we have so far, it's not a good look, man. You had an amazing message that helped and helps so many people. And I don't know if it's your arrogance. I don't know if it's narcissism. I don't know if it's misstep. I don't know if it's youth. But you fucking created this situation, man. So I don't feel sorry for him. I don't think he's guilty thus far because he's only been charged. But this is complex. And I don't think people should be rushing to judgment whether he's a good guy or he's a bad guy or the message is horrible or he's scum and none of his messaging has value. I think you got to look at this critically and think with your own brain and look at this stuff that he says that's good and helpful or that's harmful or that's goes against him, right? So thank you for letting me rant this long. Your thoughts?
I know. I think it is a bit ironic that, given his very outspoken nature, in the dynamics of men and women, that whether it's correct or incorrect, all of this has been brought out by the power of women speaking up.
Mm.
It is ironic because they're, again, I don't know if it's true or not.
I hope it's not.
I do too.
And when I say that, I hope women weren't subjected to what people say they were.
Exactly. I agree. And so, and if they are, God, I hope they lock that guy up and throw away the key. But on the same token, if even a shred of evidence is true in this thing, the fact that it was women speaking up is ironic because of how much he has downplayed the importance of them. So it is it's an interesting thing. Again, I don't necessarily think that anything that he's saying is novel.
Sure.
I feel like there's probably, if this goes away, right? If Tate goes to jail and all of that stuff, I don't think that there's going to be a whole lot of people that are now left without a voice, are left without some kind of place to receive the same message. Maybe it's in just a different way. Maybe it's less incendiary, but the same message is out there.
I think you tipped on something very key. It's not Andrew Tate's fault that people love Incendiary. And he's not the first person who has said that. I remember an old interview with Muhammad Ali on a British TV show in black and white. And he basically said, look, and I think he was talking about the tenets of Islam and that people should learn about those tenets. And he said, you don't listen to me because what I'm saying is right. I'm the champion of the world. I have all this money. I have all this flash. Why do I do that? So that you people will pay attention so that I can then essentially preach to you. That's our fault, right? We should be able to listen to Jordan Peterson. We should be able to listen to our elders, but everybody wants to listen to the tall, strong, womanizing guy who has 20 women around him who are driving Bugattis. That's on us. We should separate the person from the message.
I agree. I think that's just as much of a condemnation on us as it is on him.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, he's in essence, he's a WWF wrestler at this point.
Yes.
Everything he says is to get the attention,
yes.
to get the woos and the cheers and the boos,
yes.
Because that puts asses in seats. And so,
and I'm sorry to cut you off.
What do you do?
Well, and I don't want to make this completely anti-Tate, because I think the people who are anti-Tate are also hypocrites. And let me explain why. Because he was so incendiary, again, let's assume that these allegations are false. Because he was so incendiary, you focused on him and you wanted him canceled. Hugh Hefner's beloved. How is he that far off from Hugh Hefner? Dan Bilzerian. People love him. At least the males love him. But he hasn't been canceled the same way. Leonardo DiCaprio. It's a different lore. It's the same tactic. So apparently our society has a line. And I think human trafficking is a good line. I think this is a strong line. I support that. Yeah. I support that line.
Yeah, if you're going to draw a line in stone, I think that's a good one to start with.
But when you're flirting up to it, where is the flip? Where is the point where you've had enough? Where is the point when you're like, Balenciaga, that sucks, but yeah, next news article. Or when do you start protesting? When you get angry and do something about it? Apparently Andrew Tate is the line. I think that's kind of hypocritical. I think if you're okay with the lead up, again, assuming these allegations are false, there's not moral consistency on either side of the opinion here. I think they're either both right or they're both wrong. I don't know. But we're going long, and I'm sorry to cut you off. I know I've done the majority of talking. You're very gracious. I do appreciate it. Please join us for part 2. We're going to discuss some of the Tateisms and some of the good this guy's done. Right? Look, you want another thing that kills me at night? I literally lose sleep over this. I cannot stand Kim Kardashian. Don't like her.
Hot take.
Do you know she's achieved more legally than I ever will in my lifetime or the next? There is nothing I can do as an attorney that can trump the legal justice reform that she did. There is no amount of good I can do in my lifetime that's going to build as many schools as her taxes have done, who has supported so many indigent people as I have done. There is this weird dynamic that bad people can still do some good things, that people who are wrong can still say things that are right. And I want to explore that with a lot of these Tateisms, because at the end of the day, I made this analogy to you before we start recording. I'm going to make this analogy now. Tate doesn't need my defense. I'm nobody compared to Tate. He doesn't need my support either. What I fear the most is throwing the baby out with the bathwater in this one. Andrew Tate is not the baby here. His pro-masculinity messaging is. And I don't think that should be thrown out, or the good he's done with it, because he's unlikable or could be a criminal. I think we need to separate the two. Now, if your line is, he did that, I can't listen to him, I get it, but the truth is the truth no matter where it comes from. And don't listen to him, but also don't disregard what's right and what's true and what's helping people. That's my take. I hope you join us for part 2. We'll go into it next time. Not Maggot. I hope I can get more of your opinions and stop ranting as much, but I needed to lay this out so we can move forward. Thank you so much. Any last words?
I'll just see you guys in part 2.
All right. Thank you so much. And if you guys are willing to listen, we are willing to talk. Talk to you later. Bye. That's it. That's our show. Keep an eye out for part 2 of this discussion where Not Maggot and I will look into Tateisms and whether or not they have any merit. Please like, subscribe, share this podcast so we can get some traction. Once I get around to it, check us out on our socials. Battle Nerds on Patreon, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. You know the deal. Thanks for hanging out, and we will see you next episode.